I've never heard that phrase before.
No, I've actually worked with a lot of first-time directors, so clearly I haven't heard that before.
I haven't. He was my first. I thought the phrase was never work with children or animals, which I worked with both on this film quite a lot. But no, listen, Gary had a very clear vision. He'd been involved in this project for 2 years before we started shooting it, and I was involved with him with this project for a year before we started. So by the time we started shooting, we had a shorthand, and it was nice to watch him discover things about his ability as a director, and learn. And we were learning from him; he was learning from us, and it was a really interesting experience. And we had to all support each other because it was my first title role, it was his first feature film, and Sarah had to look after us both. Really.
And your first big studio movie, Sarah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was a real kind of, it was very nerve-wracking heading into the process, but it was funny because I really thought it would be very different, but ultimately, when you are working in a scene with another actor and it's all about finding them and making that connection, everything else kind of melts away, and it's really just about basic male-female relationships and kind of nothing else. So that was really kind of the special thing.
Male biting female relationship
right now.
Was the big lure for both of you that this was an origin story? Would you have been as interested if it was your standard Dracula story, do you think?
I don't think I would have, no, if I'm honest. I think the world has enough Dracula movies, and brilliant Dracula movies, and some brilliant portrayals of the Dracula that Bram Stoker created. But for me, it was about telling a new story. It was putting my stamp on the origin of this most famous vampire and showing the human story, this historical figure who really did inspire Bram Stoker to write it 400 years later. So for me, it was telling an untold story, which is what drew me in.
The same for you?
I kind of wanted to make a Dracula movie. Well,
you can. Maybe
I'm
you will.
I'm a big fan of Bram Stoker's book, and there's something that is there's so much imagery in his writing, and I think that's why the story has lent itself so well to cinema over the years. And I think that every Dracula film has had its own kind of aesthetic, its own kind of visual stamp on filmmaking that's indicative of the time that it was made in film history.
Yeah.
And I think that our Dracula, we have the opportunity to do that, and I think we really did. We created this kind of visual style, this visceral experience that you get to have that's, a lot of it is based around the visual effects that exist right now in our time in filmmaking.
Do you think he's somehow become a kind of forgotten man with the huge resurgence of vampire stuff at the moment?
Who? Dracula? Yeah, maybe it is time for, to enlighten the cinema-going public to the creature that inspired everything that's come after him, This is a man who's basically fighting an addiction at the end of the day. When he drinks that blood, he's dealing with a real, it's like a tug of war inside of him, So you see a flawed character, which I always think is interesting to watch on screen.
Because there was always a touch in the other depictions of Dracula that he was a bit of a player, whereas he's more of a family man.
He's sexy though, right? He's real sexy.
Undoubtedly.
I mean,
yeah, he's passionate. The dude, you're meeting the man in the prime of his life. He's a warrior prince. This is what he was famous for, respected by his enemies and loved by his people. Probably his people were very scared of him as well because he was quite a ruthless warrior and a ruthless punisher. But you're meeting the man. You're meeting the man as much as you're meeting the vampire. And this, the creature you just said about luring the virgin in. That's 400 years later. Maybe he will turn into that desperate, hungry, thirsty creature that can only go out in the dark. But at this point in his life, he's like 50% man and 50% vampire. So you're seeing a man just fighting for his human urges.
Well, and I think that's also the very kind of contemporary thing about our film is that it's not about a forbidden love or a love that is unrequited. It's about passion and love that is celebrated between two people. And that's something that I really responded to in the script, is that, you know, this woman isn't being controlled, or there's nothing kind of forbidden about her love.
She's definitely being controlled.
For her husband. She's, you know, she's in love and free about it, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and she stands by her man, you know, when he finally shows her the real thing, the real, you know, power that's inside of him in this darkness. She stands by her man and understands that he's doing it for them.
I understand you have a weakness for silver.
Was there one scary movie that completely freaked you both out?
Paranormal Activity 1. Couldn't even stay
I
in
haven't
my
seen
house.
that. I
don't,
haven't seen that.
Don't see it.
The Exorcist for me was always a big freaky. I remember when they kind of remastered it and it was in theaters, and I went with my friend. We were 14, and I just was just inconsolable, completely freaked out.
Do not watch Paranormal Activity.
No, I don't think I will. I don't think I can.
Still scares me as well. Great to meet you.
Thank you.